Okay, so think about this for a second. Someone cuts you in line at, say, the coffee shop.
Yeah.
If they just say, excuse me, you might get annoyed.
Crap, probably.
But what if they say, excuse me, because I'm late for a really important meeting, even if you've no idea if that's true? You're way more likely to just, let them go ahead. It's weird.
Yeah, it is remarkable, isn't it? That tiny word, because
Just that one word.
it acts like a trigger. Our brains are sort of wired to look for reasons, even flimsy ones sometimes.
Hmm.
And, well, that's what this deep dive is all about, getting into the psychology of persuasion and these often unconscious ways we influence each other.
And, for everyone listening, this isn't just some abstract theory, right?
Not at all.
I mean, whether you're trying to get a project approved at work or figuring out why that online ad feels impossible to ignore.
Or even just family stuff.
Exactly. Understanding these principles, it really gives you an edge. It's almost like getting a cheat sheet for human interaction.
Think of it as a shortcut. Yeah, a shortcut to understanding why some things work and, frankly, why others just fall flat. We all have these ingrained responses, these click-whir patterns, as the book calls them.
Click-whir, okay.
They're efficient most of the time, but they can also be, exploitable. We all use them, and we're definitely all susceptible to them.
All right, let's dig into that then. This click-whir idea. The book talks about them like pre-recorded tapes, right? Buttons get pushed, the tape plays. Sounds a bit robotic.
Well, it's an analogy, but it captures something real. I mean, look at the animal world first. A mother turkey, for instance.
Okay.
She'll nurture any chick, basically, as long as it makes that specific cheep, cheep sound. That one sound triggers this whole maternal routine.
Just the sound.
Just the sound. For the turkey, it's usually a super effective survival thing.
But okay, there's a catch, I'm guessing.
Right. Because, as the book points out, you can hijack it.
Mm-hmm.
Scientists took a stuffed polecat, a natural enemy, mind you, put a little recorder inside playing the cheep, cheep.
Oh, no.
And the mother turkey started cuddling up to it, trying to nurture it.
Wow. So the trigger overrode everything else. Are we saying humans are like that too? Susceptible to simple triggers?
Oh, absolutely. Think back to your coffee shop example, or the classic Xerox machine study.
Yeah, the because thing again?
Exactly. That word because act just like the cheep, cheep sound. It just flipped a switch. People complied much more, even when the reason given was totally meaningless, like, because I have to make copies.
Like we're...
Right.
Quick.
Were.
Got it. And it's not just words, is it? There's that amazing story about the turquoise jewelry. Price accidentally gets doubled.
And sales go up. Specifically among tourists who probably didn't know much about turquoise quality.
So what was the trigger there? Just the price?
It seems so. The mental shortcut, the stereotype, was expensive equals good. They were uncertain, they wanted quality, and the high price tag became that automatic signal.
Wow. Click-whir.
Yep. Another one.
It is a little unsettling, though, realizing how easily these automatic thoughts can be, switched on. But the book argues these shortcuts are actually kind of necessary, right? In our complex world.
Think about it. The sheer number of decisions we face every single day. If we had to analyze everything deeply.
We'd never get anything done.
Exactly. We'd be paralyzed. So these automatic responses are, in a way, our brain's coping mechanism for information overload. They're heuristics.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have these built-in responses, and naturally, some people figure out how to push those buttons on purpose. The book calls them exploiters.
Right. Consider fireflies. Not exactly everyday conversation, but
Go on.
the female Photurus firefly mimics the specific flashing pattern of a different species, the Photinus male.
To attract him.
Not for mating. To lure him in and then eat him.
Yikes. That's brutal.
It's a really dramatic example of exploiting a natural trigger purely for predatory gain.
And there are other examples in nature, too, like that fish that pretends to be a cleaner fish.
The saber-toothed bunny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It mimics the dance of a cleaner fish, gets close to a bigger fish that's expecting a cleaning.
And takes a bite instead.
Exactly. It exploits the big fish's automatic relaxed response. The key thing here is how subtle it often is. These exploiters mimic natural cues, making the manipulation really hard to spot.
Man, this is making me rethink, everything. What's another one of these subtle influences? The book mentioned the contrast principle.
Ah, yes. The contrast principle. It taps into how we perceive things relatively. So if you experience two things in sequence, like lifting a light box first, then a heavy one, that heavy box will feel even heavier than if you just lifted it on its own.
Okay, got it. The comparison changes the perception. How does that work in, persuasion?
Think about retail. Clothing stores often train staff to show you the most expensive item first.
The fancy suit before the sweater.
Exactly. They show you this, say, $500 suit you balk at the price.
Mm-hmm.
Then they show you a sweater for $75.
And suddenly $75 doesn't seem so bad.
Precisely. Compared to the 500, it feels reasonable. It's all about setting that initial anchor point high. The book had that rather dark but funny example too, remember? The college student's letter.
Oh, Sharon's letter, yeah, where she lists this catalog of disasters, dorm fire, broken leg, concussion.
Wildly exaggerated stuff, all designed to make the real news.
That she was failing a class.
It seemed like a massive relief in comparison. It's extreme, sure, but it shows how dramatically contrast can shift our perspective.
Okay, let's shift gears, something we deal with constantly. Returning favors, that's the reciprocation principle, yeah.
It's huge, a deeply ingrained social rule. We feel this powerful obligation to give back when someone gives us something, a gift, a favor, even a nice gesture.
It feels almost automatic, doesn't it? Like that professor who sent Christmas cards to total strangers.
Then got a surprising number back from people who had absolutely no idea who he was.
Just getting the card triggered that feeling.
That urge to reciprocate. Yeah, and society enforces this too. Think about the labels we have for people who don't reciprocate.
Moocher, freeloader, ingrate. Yeah, nobody wants that.
Right. And remember that Reagan study with the raffle tickets?
Vaguely. Refresh my memory.
Okay, so this guy, Joe, does a small, unexpected favor for some participants, just buys them a Coke. No big deal.
Okay.
Later, he asks them to buy raffle tickets. The people he bought a Coke for bought significantly more tickets than those he didn't.
Wow, just for a Coke.
Yep. And what's really fascinating is that this feeling of indebtedness, it was actually a stronger predictor of buying tickets than whether they even liked Joe personally.
Seriously, so you feel obligated even if you don't like the person.
The pull to reciprocate can be that strong. It often overrides liking.
That's powerful. Makes you think about, like, the Hare Krishna tactic with the flowers at airports back in the day.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
Giving people that unsolicited flower, even if they didn't want it, created that sense of obligation. People felt more compelled to donate just to discharge the debt, as it were.
And it's not just small interactions, right? Politics.
Oh, definitely. Log rolling, politicians, trading votes, supporting each other's bills. That's reciprocation on a grand scale. It's built into the system.
It's a constant give and take. The book even had that really moving story from World War I, the German soldier.
Ah, yeah. The soldier who couldn't complete his mission to capture an enemy soldier because that soldier had, just moments before, shared his bread with him.
That hits hard. The obligation transcended even, war.
It shows the fundamental human aspect of it. And importantly, this obligation kicks in even for uninvited favors.
Like what?
Like those address labels charities sometimes mail out. You didn't ask for them, but getting them can still make you feel a bit more obliged to donate.
Huh. Creates that little bit of indebtedness.
Mm.
Okay, now what about this rejection then retreat technique? Sounds a bit manipulative.
It can be. It's also called the door in the face technique. The basic idea is you start by making a really big request, one you fully expect to be rejected.
Okay, ask for the moon. They say no.
Yep.
Then what?
Then you immediately retreat to a smaller, more reasonable request,
Right.
which was probably what you wanted all along.
Ah, so it seems like you're compromising.
Exactly. The other person feels like you've made a concession, so they feel this subtle pressure to reciprocate your concession by agreeing to the smaller request.
But like the classic Boy Scout example, asking you to buy, I don't know, a $20 raffle ticket.
You say no, maybe politely.
And then he immediately asks, well, would you buy a $1 candy bar then?
Right. And suddenly, this candy bar seems very reasonable, plus you feel like you should meet him halfway since he came down from the big request.
Makes sense. You feel a bit bad saying no twice, too. The book mentioned Watergate in this context. How?
Well, G. Gordon Liddy's initial proposals for, let's say, intelligence gathering were apparently these incredibly elaborate, expensive, and frankly insane schemes. Millions of dollars, kidnapping, mugging squads.
Wild stuff. And they got rejected, obviously.
Repeatedly. But each time he came back with a slightly less outrageous, scaled-down plan. Until finally, they approved the still illegal, but comparatively modest plan that led to the Watergate break-in.
So the earlier crazy proposals made the final one seem almost reasonable by contrast.
It created that perception of retreat, of concession. And studies, like one at UCLA on bargaining, found that people targeted with this technique often feel more responsible for the final agreement.
Interesting. Because I feel like they helped shape it by rejecting the first offer.
That seems to be part of it. They feel like they brought the other person down, so they're more satisfied and more likely to stick to the deal.
So how do you defend against this? If someone hits you with a huge request, then immediately scales back.
The key is recognition. Ask yourself, was that first request genuinely feasible, or was it likely just set up? If you perceive the initial offer not as a real starting point, but as a tactic.
Then the perceived concession isn't real either.
Exactly. The rule of reciprocity applies to genuine favors and concessions, not manipulation tactics. Once you redefine that first big ask as a ploy, the pressure to reciprocate the retreat dissolves.
Got it. Reframe the interaction. Okay, next up, commitment and consistency. This one feels very familiar, that internal pressure to stick with what we've already said or done.
It's incredibly powerful. We have this deep need to see ourselves and be seen by others as consistent. Once we make a commitment, especially if it's active, public, and effortful,
We feel locked in.
we feel strong internal and external pressure to behave consistently with that commitment, sometimes even when it doesn't make logical sense anymore.
The book had that story about Sarah and Tim. She makes this huge commitment to him, breaking off her engagement.
Right, and then the original reason for that commitment, Tim saying he'd change his ways, turns out to be false. He doesn't change.
But she sticks with him, even more committed.
Even more so, because she'd already made such a significant public commitment. To reduce the cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort, she had to justify her past action by finding new reasons to value the relationship, convincing herself it was the right choice after all.
Wow. That desire for consistency can really trap us. And it makes us resistant to changing our minds, doesn't it? Even if evidence points the other way.
Absolutely. Think about people heavily invested financially or emotionally in a particular group or belief system. They might encounter information that contradicts their beliefs.
And they just double down.
Often, yes. The commitment itself becomes the reason to believe,
Wow.
overriding the contradictory facts. It protects their sense of consistency.
And businesses can exploit this. That toy company strategy around Christmas. That's clever, in a sneaky way.
Oh yeah. Advertise a hot toy like crazy before Christmas, get parents to promise it to their kids.
Creating the commitment.
Exactly. But then deliberately understock that toy. Parents can't find it, have to buy other presents. Then after Christmas, the ads for the original hot toy reappear. The kids remember the promise.
And pressure the parents who feel obliged to follow through on the earlier commitment, leading to more sales. Genius.
Sneaky genius. It highlights that getting that initial commitment, even just a promise, is crucial for activating consistency. Taking a stand, going on record.
That's what locks it in. Like in the Chinese POW camps during the Korean War, they didn't start with big demands, did they?
No, very small ones. Get the American prisoners to make seemingly tiny anti-American or pro-communist statements. Maybe write them down. The U.S. is not perfect. Things like that.
Stuff that might seem trivially true, hard to argue with.
Exactly. But once a prisoner wrote it down, especially if it was shown to others, they started to shift their own self-image slightly to align with that statement. Maybe I do have some criticisms. And that small shift paved the way for more significant collaboration later. They needed to be consistent with what they'd already said or written.
That's the foot in the door technique, isn't it? Start small, get bigger compliance later.
Precisely. Like that California driving safety study. Asking homeowners first just to put a tiny "Be a safe driver" sticker in their window.
Easy yes.
Very easy yes. But those who agreed were then massively more likely weeks later to agree to put a huge, ugly, drive carefully billboard on their front lawn.
Just because they'd agreed to the tiny sticker first.
Because that small act changed how they saw themselves. I'm the kind of person who supports driving safety publicly. The big request then became consistent with that new self-image.
And making commitments publicly really ramps up the pressure, right? Like weight loss clinics having people announce goals out loud.
Oh yeah, or that story of the woman who quit smoking by telling literally everyone she knew. That public declaration makes inconsistency much harder, much more socially costly.
You don't want to look like you failed in front of everyone. Effort plays a role too, doesn't it? The harder we work for something.
The more committed we feel. Think about intense initiation rites, fraternities, military boot camps, tribal ceremonies. The sheer effort and sometimes suffering involved makes membership feel more valuable and strengthens commitment to the group.
I went through hell for this. It must be worth it.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a form of self-justification. And crucially, we take inner responsibility for commitments we feel we've chosen freely without obvious external pressure.
Like in that Friedman study with the kids and the robot toy.
Exactly. One group of boys got a severe threat if they played with the cool robot. The other got just a mild warning.
Okay.
Later, when the researcher left, the boys who got the mild warning were much less likely to play with the forbidden toy.
Why? Wouldn't the severe threat work better?
Because the severe threat provided a clear external reason not to play. Well, I get in big trouble. The mild warning wasn't strong enough justification on its own, so those boys had to find an internal reason. I guess I don't really want to play with it anyway. They took ownership of the decision.
Ah, they convinced themselves. And this leads to things like lowball tactic in sales.
Classic example, especially with cars. The salesperson offers an amazing price, gets you hooked, maybe you even start the paperwork. You've made the commitment.
You're already picturing yourself driving it.
Right. Then, oops, the manager won't approve that price, or there was a calculation error, or some options weren't included. The price goes up.
But you often still buy it.
Surprisingly often. Because you've already committed, you started building justifications in your own mind for buying that car. Even when the initial attractive price is removed, the commitment often holds.
So the low ball creates the commitment, which then grows its own legs. Okay, so how do we fight this? Emerson talked about foolish consistency being the hobgoblin of little minds. How do we avoid that?
The book suggests listening to your body, actually. Those gut feelings, the stomach signs. If you feel trapped or uneasy after agreeing to something.
Pay attention.
Yeah, that might be your subconscious telling you you're only doing it out of consistency, not because you truly want to. Another technique is to ask yourself that key question.
Which is?
Knowing what I know now, if I could go back in time, would I make the same commitment?
Ah, mentally rewind.
Right? If the answer is no, then the current reasons aren't strong enough, and you're likely just being driven by the desire to not contradict your past self. That's foolish consistency.
That's a really practical tool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on. Social proof. This is basically looking around to see what everyone else is doing, right?
Exactly. Especially when we're uncertain or the situation is ambiguous, we rely heavily on the actions of others to figure out how we should behave. Think about canned laughter on TV shows.
Ugh, I hate canned laughter. Does anyone actually like it?
Most people say they don't. But broadcasters use it because, well, it works. It provides social proof that other people think the show is funny, which makes us, the viewers, more likely to perceive it as funny and laugh along.
So it's manufacturing the appearance of popularity, like advertisers saying fastest growing or largest selling.
Precisely. Or charity telethons, constantly scrolling lists of people who've already donated. It signals, look at all these other people doing this, you should too.
It's the power of the crowd. Cabot Roberts' quote comes to mind, something about 95% imitators.
Yeah, since 95% of the people are imitators and only 5% initiators, people are persuaded more by the actions of others than by any proof we can offer. It's a bit cynical, maybe, but there's truth there.
Even nightclub owners creating fake lines outside.
Makes the place look popular and exclusive, leveraging social proof to make people want to get in.
So when is this social proof most powerful? The book said uncertainty and similarity.
Exactly. When we're unsure how to act, we look to others. And we're most influenced by the actions of people we see as similar to ourselves.
Like in that lost wallet study.
Yeah, right. People were much more likely to return a wallet they found if the letter inside it, supposedly from a previous finder, indicated that the previous finder was similar to them culturally, linguistically. Similarity boosts the impact.
I remember you mentioning your son learning to swim. It wasn't the expert adults, but seeing another kid like him do it.
That was the turning point. Seeing Tommy, another little 3-year-old, just confidently dive in, that provided the specific social proof he needed. If you can do it, maybe I can too.
That makes perfect sense. But social proof has a really dark side too, doesn't it? That disturbing link between heavily publicized suicides and subsequent increases in accidents.
Yeah, the work by Dr. David Phillips on the Werther effect, or copycat suicides. It's unsettling, but the data suggests that highly publicized suicides, especially of celebrities, are often followed by a statistical spike in fatal single-vehicle accidents and plane crashes, particularly involving people similar in age to the person who died by suicide.
So it's not just coincidence, it's imitation.
The social conditions explanation suggests the same societal factors causing the suicide might cause accidents, but the copycat explanation seems more robust. It's a tragic example of social proof influencing life or death decisions, potentially unconsciously.
And the Jonestown mass suicide. How does social proof fit in there?
The book argues it was a major factor. Imagine being relocated to a completely unfamiliar, isolated jungle environment in Guyana
Cut off.
from previous social ties, surrounded by uncertainty.
You'd look to others for cues on how to behave.
Massively. In that vacuum of information and extreme uncertainty, the followers look to each other, and especially to the charismatic leader, Jim Jones, for guidance. The actions of the first few to comply likely created powerful social proof for the others to follow.
Wow, it's chilling. Even historically, people have known how to manipulate this, right? Like clacking in French
Oh
theaters.
yeah, for centuries. Paid applauders, the claque, strategically placed in the audience to stimulate applause and laughter, creating artificial social proof for the performance's success. It was often quite open.
So people knew it was fake, but it still worked.
It seems so. And think about everyday things like driving. You see a bunch of cars suddenly switching lanes on the highway.
You automatically assume they know something you don't, right? Like there's an accident ahead in your lane.
Exactly. So you switch to, even if there's no actual reason, we just trust the crowd's wisdom, sometimes mistakenly. It's called pluralistic ignorance when everyone is privately doubting but publicly conforming, assuming everyone else knows best.
Like manipulating betting odds at the racetrack by seeding the tote board with early bets on a particular horse.
Creates the illusion of informed money backing that horse, encouraging others to follow suit. So the takeaway, don't just blindly follow the herd. Sometimes you need to lift your head, look around, and question the crowd's actions.
Good advice. Okay, next principle, liking. This seems simple. We prefer to say yes to people we like, but what makes us like people?
Well, several things. Physical attractiveness is one, like it or not. Research consistently shows attractive people have an advantage in social interaction, including persuasion.
The halo effect. We assume they have other good qualities too.
Something like that. Similarity is another huge factor. We like people who are like us.
In what ways?
Background, opinions, personality traits, even dress style or common interests. Remember that insurance study? Salespeople were more successful when they matched clients on things like age, religion, politics, even smoking habits.
So finding common ground is key. What about just mirroring someone?
Mirroring and matching body language, speech
Yep.
patterns, yeah, that can subconsciously increase liking and rapport. Compliments work too, obviously. We tend to like people who praise us, even if we suspect flattery.
Okay, attractiveness, similarity, compliments. What else? Contact and cooperation seem important.
Hugely important, especially cooperation. The Robbers Cave experiment is the classic demonstration here.
Right. The boys at summer camp split into two groups, the Eagles and the Rattlers.
Yep. Initially, just being in separate groups led to friction. Then the researchers introduced competitions, baseball games, tug-of-war.
And things got really hostile, right? Name calling, cabin raids.
Intense rivalry. Mere contact wasn't enough to fix it. What did work was introducing shared problems, superordinate goals that required the two groups to cooperate.
Like their water supply breaking down or the food truck getting stuck.
Exactly. Things they couldn't solve alone. Forced cooperation towards these common goals gradually broke down the hostility. They started seeing each other as partners, not enemies. Friendships formed across group lines. Liking increased.
So shared struggle, working together, builds liking. That's the idea behind the jigsaw classroom too, isn't it? To reduce prejudice in schools.
Precisely. Structuring lessons so students from different ethnic groups have to cooperate and share information to succeed helps them see each other more positively. And think about the good cop, bad cop routine in interrogations.
How does liking fit there?
The bad cop creates fear and tension. Then the good cop steps in, seems understanding, maybe offers a coffee, appears to be on the suspect's side against the bad cop.
Making the suspect like and trust the good cop.
Right. Creating liking through contrast and apparent cooperation, making the suspect more willing to confess to the friend. It's manipulation, but it leverages liking.
Association plays a role too, right? Linking people or things together.
Definitely. We can develop positive or negative feelings based purely on association. Advertisers link products with attractive models or beloved celebrities, hoping the positive feelings transfer.
Like the celebrity endorsement.
Exactly. But it works negatively too, guilt by association. Or even illogical things like people blaming the meteorologist for bad weather.
Poor weatherman. And sports fans, the way they talk about their teams.
Oh, the basking in reflected glory phenomenon.
Yeah.
After a win, fans are quick to say, "We won," associating themselves with the success.
But after a loss,
It's often they lost, distancing themselves from the failure. It's about managing public image through association. Isaac Asimov had that great quote about rooting for your hometown team.
something about rooting for yourself.
Yeah, whom do you root for? Yourself, of course. You root for your neighborhood, your college, your town, You are identifying yourself with it. If it wins, you have won.
So defense against liking. If we suddenly feel we like someone trying to sell us something way more than expected.
That's the warning sign. Mentally separate the person making the request from the request itself. Judge the deal on its merits, not just on how much you like the salesperson or the friend hosting the Tupperware party.
Right. Focus on the offer, not the messenger. Okay, two left, and they're big ones. Authority. Why are we so susceptible to authority figures?
It's deeply ingrained, likely from childhood learning and societal structures. We're generally taught that obeying legitimate authority is right and disobeying is wrong. And often it's adaptive experts usually do know more.
But the Milgram experiments showed something much darker, didn't they?
They really did. Ordinary people willing to administer what they believed were painful, even dangerous electric shocks to another person, simply because an authority figure in a lab coat told them to continue. It was a chilling demonstration of obedience, overriding personal conscience for many participants.
And it happens almost automatically, like, click, roar again.
It often does seem to operate that way. We defer to authority often without conscious thought. The problem is, we can be swayed not just by actual authority, but by the mere symbols of authority.
Symbols like what?
Titles, clothing, and trappings. Think about titles like doctor or professor.
They command instant respect even outside their area of expertise sometimes. Like that professor friend you mentioned earlier, people just deferred once they knew his title.
Exactly. And clothing is huge. Uniforms, obviously. But even a well-tailored business suit. Remember that jaywalking study?
Where people were more likely to follow a jaywalker in a suit than one in casual clothes?
Significantly more likely. The suit conveyed authority, legitimacy, and then there are the trappings, things like expensive cars, fancy jewelry, prestigious addresses. They signal status and, by extension, authority.
That hospital study is terrifying, too. Nurses almost giving an overdose because someone claiming to be a doctor ordered it over the phone.
It highlights the danger of automatic obedience without verification. So how do we resist inappropriate authority influence?
The book suggests two questions.
Yeah, two crucial questions. First, is this authority truly an expert? Is their expertise relevant to this specific situation? Second, how truthful can we expect this expert to be here? Are they likely to be impartial, or do they have something to gain by persuading us?
So checking credentials and potential biases. What about that tactic where someone seems to argue against their own interests?
Oh, that's a clever way to build trust. Like a waiter saying, actually, the dish you ordered is okay, but the slightly cheaper one is much better tonight.
Like Vincent the waiter in the book.
Right. By seeming candid and prioritizing the customer's interest over immediate profit, they establish trustworthiness and authority. This often leads to bigger orders or tips down the line. It makes their later recommendations more believable.
Makes sense. Build trust first. Okay, last principle, scarcity. Things seem more valuable when they're less available.
This one is powerful. Opportunities, information, products, they all seem more desirable when their availability is limited. Think limited edition, final day of sale, only 2 left in stock.
It creates urgency. That Mesa Temple example, huge interest when non-members had a very limited time to visit.
Exactly. The temporary nature, the scarcity of the opportunity dramatically increased its perceived value. Compliance pros use limited number and deadline tactics constantly.
Like that appliance store example where the salesperson says the item is sold out, gets you committed, then finds one in the back.
Classic scarcity play. It leverages commitment and scarcity. By making it seem rare and hard to get after you want it, it intensifies your desire.
So why does scarcity work so well? Two main reasons.
Right. First, it's another mental shortcut. We often assume, rightly or wrongly, that things that are difficult to obtain are probably better quality. It's heuristic thinking again.
Okay, scarce equals valuable. What's the second reason?
Psychological reactance. Basically, as opportunities become less available, we feel we're losing freedom. And we hate losing freedoms we already have.
So we react against the restriction by wanting the item even more.
Precisely. It's that desire to preserve our options. You see it clearly in the Terrible Twos when children first strongly assert their independence against restrictions. It's why censorship often backfires and increases interest in the forbidden material.
The Romeo and Juliet effect, too. Parental opposition making the romance seem more precious.
Exactly. The threatened loss of freedom intensifies the desire. And scarcity of information can be potent, too. That beef importer study.
Where they found that telling wholesalers about both a potential beef shortage and that this shortage information was exclusive led to the biggest jump in orders.
Yeah, the scarcity double whammy, scarce product, plus scarce information about the scarcity. That was the most persuasive combination.
And we seem to react more strongly to newly experienced scarcity, right? Compared to something that's always been rare.
Definitely. That cookie study is a great illustration. Cookies taken from a jar with only 2 were rated as more desirable than the exact same cookies taken from a jar with 10.
Even though the cookies were identical.
Yep. But even more interesting, cookies from a jar that started full and then became scarce, most were taken away, were rated as most desirable of all. Loss, or recent scarcity, hits harder than constant scarcity.
Like the political unrest examples when previously available rights or goods are suddenly taken away.
Exactly. Or inconsistent parents who sometimes allow something and sometimes forbid it. That creates a feeling of lost freedom and can lead to more rebellion than consistent rules.
And creating competition feeds into scarcity, too, like the real estate agent bringing multiple buyers to a viewing at the same time.
Creates social proof and scarcity. Look, others want this limited resource, I better act fast. So how do we combat scarcity pressure?
2 steps again.
Yeah. First, recognize the emotional arousal. When you feel that rush, that frantic urge triggered by scarcity, use it as a cue to stop. Pause. Calm down.
Don't get swept away.
Right. Then, ask yourself the crucial question. Why do I want this item? Do I want it for its actual utility, its function, the pleasure it will bring? Or do I primarily want it because it's scarce?
Separate the desire for the item itself from the desire caused by its rarity.
Exactly. Remember, as the book says, scarce cookies don't taste any better. Focus on the merit of the item, not just its availability.
Wow, okay. That brings us through all 6 principles. Just to quickly recap. Reciprocation,
Commitment and consistency,
social proof,
liking,
authority,
and scarcity. We've seen how they often work automatically, under the radar, shaping our decisions.
and hopefully understanding them gives everyone listening a bit more power, right? To see them coming, maybe resist when needed, make more informed choices. Those aha moments when you recognize a tactic.
That's the real value. Seeing the mechanics behind why you suddenly feel obliged or consistent or drawn to follow the crowd or trust an authority or grab that last one.
It is pretty eye-opening, realizing how much runs on autopilot, but just knowing, just having that awareness, that's the first big step, isn't it?
Absolutely. In a world saturated with persuasive messages, being aware of these fundamental psychological triggers is more important than ever.
So maybe a final thought for people listening. As you go through your week, maybe just, pay attention. Notice the little nudges, the moments you feel swayed. How often are these principles subtly guiding your choices? You might be surprised.
And perhaps also consider the responsibility that comes with this knowledge. Now that you're more aware of these powerful tools, think about how you use them or how you respond when others use them on you. It's a fascinating landscape, always changing, always worth observing.